Hello, Simon. Welcome to the Doing CX Right show.
Hi, Stacy. Thank you so much for having me.
I am grateful that you are here because you talk about really important topics that people need to know right now and how to apply it to their life and to their work. So let's start with introducing who are you? What do you do for a living?
I help organizations help their people, their most important resource and asset, to find their brilliance and be resilient.
Mm. What made you tap into those topics of all the things you could talk about?
Well, my mentor said to me a number of years ago, he asked me how I was doing. And I said to him, quite honestly, if I was born in a different ethnic group, I would probably be very successful here in America. And he said, you're stuck in your mind and your body thinking the pigmentation of your skin determines your outcome. You weren't born to fit in, you were born to be brilliant. And when he said it, it just kind of unlocked something in me. So for the last 20 years, I've been on this journey of trying to help people unlock and release their brilliance.
I love that backstory. It makes a lot of sense. And I know a lot of people that are going to relate to that. Wow. Based on that long ago advice and how you've continued to take it forward, if you could go back in time to your 20-year-old self based on what you know now, what would you say to the younger Simon?
I would probably say it's not who you are that holds you back, it's who you think you're not that holds you back. And sometimes you focus and invest more energy into who you think you're not instead of who you really are at the core.
I love that you said the word energy. I've been studying energy because we really have to manage our energy, I think, even more than time. What's your view?
You're absolutely right. We've often been taught that time management is so important, but in the world that we live in, energy management is most important because you go to a job and you are employed, but when you find your brilliance and resilience, not only is the customer the benefit of what you are doing, it's because you've deployed your energy into something that matters and people can feel it in their head, their heart, and their hands.
Ooh, well said. Write that down, people. Let's get to the heart of the topic of doing customer experience right. When I say those words to you, what comes up for you? What does that mean?
Customer service is the department, but customer love is a mindset. And when organizations and businesses have that mindset of customer love, what they realize, they leave an emotional tattoo on the customer, and that customer begins to yelp about that brand.
Yeah. Now, many companies are doing CX right, many are not. What do you believe is the key problem, the biggest challenge impacting customers? What's getting in the way?
The key problem that we've identified in our national study, The State of Work in America, Thriving in Resilience and Brilliance, is that middle management is kind of like the sandwich. They're sandwiched between those at the top of the food chain, executives, those that are on front line closest to the customer, and they're being told to work harder, move faster, get a better net promoter score, when in reality, they need to be equipped in order to create a better experience for employees so employees can ultimately be a benefit to the customer.
I agree. I also believe that a big challenge is company silos. What do you see in that regard? Do you see that also as a prevailing issue?
I see it all over the world. In fact, in Europe, they call it stovepipes. And what happens in stovepipes and silos, you have subcultures. And those subcultures are creating outcomes that impact oftentimes the customer experience in a negative way.
Mm. So, where does brilliance come in?
Yeah. So if you think about this, business is like surfing in the ocean. You're knocked off your surfboard because of change, but it's your resilience that gets you back on the surfboard. And it's your brilliance that allows you to catch the next wave to do customer service and customer experience right. So, brilliance, we asked working Americans, how do they define brilliance? And they said it's intelligence, creativity, and confidence. So, in other words, Stacy, when individuals know that ownership has been transferred to them to take care of the customer, they find creative ways to solve a problem, not because they have to, but because they want to. That's brilliance.
Yeah. And I would also add on that it's the discretionary effort that they'd be willing to put in.
Absolutely.
Can you define a bit more, go a little deeper into brilliance and resilience? Because I think people have different definitions or mindsets around that.
So we ask working Americans, how do they define resilience? And they defined it as perseverance, grit, and problem solving. So make a mental post it note of that. So when I work in an environment, what we discovered is that 55% of working Americans said that they would take a lower paying job to work for a manager who inspired their brilliance. So, in other words, when the alarm clock goes off on Monday morning, I show up at an environment, and the first thing you're going to think about, does that manager inspire me to go the extra step, to be creative, to be confident in what I'm doing? And if so, I'll solve the problem, hence resilience. I'll find a way, even when the customer might be irate. And what you really want is to create that environment that invites individuals to opt in and be the solution to a problem.
Well said. Now, who's doing that right, in your opinion? Who's a model of that?
I think Chewy.com is an amazing model. I'll give you a quick example. I was teaching and sharing some Disney principles because obviously I used to work at Disney, and I used Chewy as an example. And a lady came up to me and she says, "You won't believe what Chewy did." They called me one day and they asked for me to send a picture of my dog. And I sent it to them. And a few weeks later, they sent me back a hand drawn portrait of my dog, framed free of charge as a gift from Chewy.com. And I just thought it was just a one off until I was sharing some other examples of Chewy.com. And a lady said to me, her pet food subscription was delivered. Unfortunately, her dog had passed away. She called Chewy to share with them, "Hey, my dog has passed away." And the person on the other end of the line said, "Listen, we're going to credit your account. We apologize for the loss of your dog. And perhaps you want to donate the food to a pet shelter." She thought that was the end of the transaction. The next day, her doorbell rang, and there's a guy outside the door with a sympathy card and a bouquet of flowers from Chewy.com.
I have to take a deep breath on this because for two reasons. So, for my audience that may not know, we had to put my dog to sleep last week, and I'm grieving incredibly right now. The other piece of this is that Chewy, it's a beautiful story. And I'm saddened by the fact that another company had the opportunity to do exactly that and did not. So, what I mean is, I called Farmer's Dog, which is where we get our food. And I love the company, and I think it's very good quality food for a dog. And I had to call them and say, please adjust the quantity of food. Instead of two dogs, I now have one. And I couldn't be even sadder. The person on the phone could actually detect it. And they were empathetic. However, that was a missed opportunity when I got my box of food. They could have put a card in there. They could have put something in there to say, you've been a long time customer and we feel you. We care. Something. They didn't.
Moments matter. And the brands that get it right understand that a micro moment that you just experience really is about an emotion, a connection, a perception, and a memory. And how do you do it right?
How do you do it right? Exactly. Well, I want to add one more thing before we go into how do you do it right regarding another situation with my passing dog, because there's a lesson here. And I will be talking about this story for a very long time. And that is you could have the best doctor, the best veterinarian. However, if the office staff doesn't do it right, it doesn't matter. You have a great doctor. And I'm not going to use names because I'm not that kind of, I don't do that. I don't want to badmouth. However, I want the story to be known, which is right before putting our dog to sleep and the sadness going on in the room before the doctor walks in. The office person comes in and says, "How do you want to handle your bill?" You can't make this up. And there's a real customer journey that everyone in the organization, I don't even care if it's a small company, they have to go through it. They have to understand those moments of truth. And so I will never forget the timing of asking, how do we want to pay right before the injection comes in?
Wow.
It doesn't have to be that way. On a happier note, what do you think is the underlying reason for these issues, for the lack of communication, for the silos? What do you have to say to that?
It comes down to culture. And I know that many of the experts that you have interviewed in time past have mentioned that in some way, shape, or form. But I define culture as how you do what you do when no one is looking. That's culture. So the miscommunication, the miscues, the dropping the ball, passing the hot potatoes, not my job, that's culture. So if we were to zoom out, it really starts with leadership because leadership sets the tone. And then leadership, as you know, and you have said extensively and have taught forever, leaders create the experience for employees, and employees create the experience for customers, and customers drive revenue. So, in other words, if we want to get to the revenue, to the bottom line, we have to make sure that the leaders are modeling for employees the right behavior, the wrong behavior, and having a conversation about it and learning from it.
Why do you think silos is so common around companies? Obviously, culture has to do something with it, but every company I've ever been at, over 25 years, there's never been one that a silo doesn't exist. How's that possible?
Number one, people are protecting their turf. So everybody's protecting their turf because no one wants to lose headcount, right? I think the second thing is people are trying to protect their budget. They don't want anything cut and they think they're doing everything right. And they don't listen to others because they're like, this is the way I've been doing it. This is the way it's going to be. And employees and team members see that and they don't partner with other organizations to communicate what needs to happen. But I think the third thing is for those companies that are publicly traded, they are living from quarter to quarter because they are held by hostage by Wall Street. And Wall Street is saying if you don't hit a certain number, so now that rolls all the way down where people are focused on results instead of a relationship. And what happens, those silos happen because everything is transactional. Move quick, move fast, do it now. And we're not stepping back to say, is this the right thing to do? It's just not a thing to do. So those silos build up, they become more reinforced. Nobody wants to change because they're looking over their shoulder.
Hmm. Tell us a bit more of the research you've done and the data that has been eye opening to you.
So we asked working Americans 27 customized questions, just really trying to understand how does really resilience show up in the workplace. And what we discovered is 80% of working Americans want managers and executives to model resilience for them. So, in other words, before you say go and do for the customer, are you modeling for me how to solve problems, how to persevere, how to have grit, how to think, how to be that anticipatory thinker to see around the corner for what's not yet. So it's one thing to say, it's another thing to do. And is it model? The other interesting insight, Stacy, was 74% of working Americans would prefer to work for a manager who had no formal education instead of a manager who has advanced degrees. So, what does that say? When I first got promoted into leadership at Disney, I was a jerk of a boss, if the truth be told. I was in over my skis. I had a need to be right. I was in my own way, and I was the smartest person in the room. And in other words, I ran an adult daycare center. So, talking about a silo. And when I realized people started to divorce me as a leader and move on to other areas of Disney. And when we went through the exit interview for HR, they said, oh, it's just time for me to move on in my career. The reality is, I was emotionally clueless. I was emotionally disconnected. I didn't give a rip or care about you. I'm like, if you got a job, you should be happy. And what I realized is Disney was about to invite me to find my happiness elsewhere. So when I look at our research is saying people want to work for a leader that is emotionally dialed in, not just technically sharp.
Emotionally dialed in, not just technically sharp. Powerful. Absolutely powerful. I want to expand on that a bit, which again, in my current state of grieving, I've been in companies and I hear from people in companies who are going through personal crisis right now. And the people that feel like their boss is giving them permission to grieve, to be able to handle their personal situation, it has an absolute impact on the customer experience. That's my perspective, feeling, and witness. What do you see in that regard?
So Dr. Maria Music, Muzik, University of Michigan, says in her research, human beings need three things right now: to be seen, to be valued, and to be understood. So when a person is seen, valued, and understood, a boss or a leader or manager doesn't have to ask them to go the extra step. They'll know in their heart of hearts that you care about them and you want them to thrive and flourish. And when people can intuitively sense that, they step up even more.
Is that a matter of training? Like this seems so human basic, but yet not done enough. What is it? Is it training? Is it hire the right people? What do people go do with this?
What I've seen in organizations that I've been working with that really, really get it right, it really starts at the top, cascades down, but it's the consistency of how management and leadership communicate and connect. And they do what is basic and common sense. They make it common practice. They do it every single day. It's who they are, it's their character. And the character of a company comes through every time. And I believe, back to energy, customers can feel that digitally and in person or on the phone. They can sense that this place is really the real deal and they're just not blowing smoke.
I also have seen being in a contact center where the agents are on the phone, the difference when they are dressed for success and their smile comes through the phone versus the opposite. Even though no one sees them, you
Yes,
feel the smile.
totally. And it's that warmth. Like, for instance, Rackspace is a great example. The warmth that comes through in what they call knock your socks off service, where there's not going to be a problem. And if there is a problem, they're going to run through a wall to solve that problem, even on the phone. And you can really feel that someone is doing something about the problem at hand.
Mm. So someone listening now says, "Yes, I'm in. I I'm going to adopt all this. I'm going to make some changes." What would you say are the top 3 things to go do so that you can really shift your culture?
Number one, create a culture of storytelling. Facts tell, stories sell. How do we tell the story of what we did right and the areas of opportunity. Create that story and share that story early and often. The second thing, when you think about your customer satisfaction scores, your net promoter scores, think about, are you instructing those who are on the front line dealing with the customer? Are you instructing them and teaching them the right incentives? Point in case. So my son and I had to go and get his car fixed. And as we're leaving, the serviceman said, "Hey, you're going to get a call. And when you get that call, I hope you'll give me a 5-star rating." Now, if there's a reason why you can't give it, so you see where this is going. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he's totally gamified the system. He's like, peppering us, talking about leading the witness, right? And so that's not, you don't want to do that. You want to help people understand the why behind the what. So ensure that people have the right incentives. And then the third thing is realize what gets recognized gets repeated. Research says 1 minute of recognition creates 100 minutes of initiative. So when people do the right behavior as it relates to the customer and that customer experience and that journey, they will go above and beyond when you tell them, here's what you did right, and here's why it's amazing.
Fabulous data points. Now, how do you sustain, right? People will do sometimes, they get entrenched with, oh, here's the idea, let's do it. And then that's it. Box checked.
Make it a micro practice. And when I say make it a micro practice, chunk it down. Years ago, I did some work for Ritz Carlton Learning Institute through a company called Master Connection. And one of the things Ritz Carlton would do back in the day, and they still do it to this day, is they have what they call now the 12 basics. All 3 shifts, every single day at a Ritz Carlton around the world, they focus on stories. What did we get right? How did it work? What was the feedback? And they do it consistently 7 days a week, every shift. So now there's a cadence, there's an understanding. You are Velcroing yourself to the way it's supposed to be done right. And it's in that Velcro of understanding where people are like, whoa, this is how we do it. This is why we do it. And we do it over and over.
Consistency, absolutely, in anything you do. It's a necessity. It's not a nice to. Feedback, we know, is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough people take the feedback, do something with the feedback, close the loop with the feedback. What do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, we have to understand how do people receive feedback. And what I mean by that, Stacy, is everybody is wired differently. The word education comes from a word called educare. Educare means to draw out, not just put in. So when I'm giving feedback, am I talking to a person that is a visual learner, auditory, hands-on? How am I communicating to them in such a way where they understand that the feedback is not a personal attack, but it is an invitation for them to evolve? And when they begin to truly hear at that deeper level, you are drawing out of them if they're really connecting the dots or if it's just going over their head.
Mm. And that comes to personalization, no cookie cutter approach.
Absolutely. Think about parenting. Every child that you have is different. And you understand that child and you relate to them accordingly.
Yeah. All right, as we're coming to the end here, leadership advice. What is the best advice you've received or given to someone else?
The job of a leader is not necessarily to motivate people to work harder or to take care of the customer. The job of a leader is to invite people on a journey to discover the leader within themselves while they're following you. So a person can never go to a place that they've never been unless they've seen you do it yourself.
Mm, that is brilliant. Had to just say that. And what is the one takeaway you want people to remember from this conversation?
When you understand the power of customer love, and I cannot emphasize love enough, here's the research according to Gallup. Roughly 7 out of 10 people are dealing with stress, anxiety, borderline depression. So when we show up to take care of our most important customers, that being employees, and they feel cared for, because we know HR may raise an eyebrow when we use the word love. When they feel cared for, they will then carry that care and love to the customer.
In other words, pay it forward.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for being on my show and sharing such deep wisdom that makes a difference in the world, not just in the workplace, but in life. And I think that's why we in customer service and experience just love what we do. There's the love word because together there's a real movement happening. And so I just love what you talk about.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Good to be with you.
Thank you. And I will include all the ways to reach you in the show notes. So I encourage everyone listening to go look and connect with Simon. Thank you again.